The drip of the coolant leak was the only clock Jace Harlan had left. Drop, hiss. Silence, drop, hiss, silence. It hit the grimy floor plating of Sector 4 every 6 seconds. 10 times a minute. 600 times an hour. Jace did not need a chronometer to know that he had been awake for 20 hours straight. He measured his life in the accumulation of gray fluid in the bucket beneath the pipe. Gallows Reach Station was not a place where people came to live. It was a place where ships came to die and where people like Jace came to be forgotten. The station was a haphazard ring of cannibalized hull plates, rusted docking clamps, and pressurized habitation modules that smelled perpetually of recycled ozone and stale coffee. It hung in the drift of the frontier belt, a lawless stretch of space wedged uncomfortably between human corporate territories and the vast predatory expanse of the Fenran Dominion. Jace wiped his hands on a rag that was greasier than the engine part he was holding. He was a man of sharp angles and dust. His coveralls were 3 shades of gray, patched with a 4th shade of black, and his hair was the color of dark iron, usually hidden under a welding cap. He looked like every other scrap rat in the belt, tired, hungry, and fundamentally unimpressed by the universe. "Talk to me, Rust," Jace muttered, tossing the wrench onto the workbench. The station's artificial intelligence, a patchwork system salvaged from a mining hauler 3 decades ago, crackled over the overhead speakers. Its voice, synthesized with a permanent rasp, as if the code itself had throat cancer. "Atmospheric scrubbers are at 60% efficiency," Rust replied. "And the long-range sensor array is complaining about a ghost signal in Quadrant 9. Again. I told her that ghosts do not exist, but she is very persistent. It is probably just thermal noise from the nebula," Jace said, picking up a nutrient bar. He unwrapped the foil. The bar was brown blocky and tasted vaguely like cardboard that had been stored near a banana. "Ignore it. Unless it has an engine signature, I do not care. How is the coolant pressure?" "Critical, obviously. You promised to weld the bypass valve 2 days ago." "I got busy," Jace lied. He took a bite of the bar and grimaced. "I was busy contemplating the futility of existence." "You were asleep under the console," Rust corrected. Jace walked to the viewport. The transparasteel was thick, scratched by micrometeoroids, but it still offered a view of the void. Out here, the stars were thick and cold. To his left was the frontier chaos and freedom. To his right, across the light years, lay the Dominion, the Wolf Empire. Stories said the Fenrens could smell fear across a vacuum, that their ships hunted in packs and howled on the comms frequencies before they tore you apart. Jace did not care about wolfmen or empires. He cared about silence. He cared about the fact that no one in the core systems knew the name Jace Harlan anymore. To them, the brilliant architect of the Paradox Flux Lattice was dead, or at least buried so deep under corporate non-disclosure agreements and blackened records that he might as well be. He preferred the scrapyard. Machines were honest. If a thruster failed, it was because of physics, not politics. "Jace," Rust said. The tone had changed. The sarcasm was gone, replaced by a rigid algorithmic urgency. "That ghost signal. It is not thermal noise." Jace frowned, turning back to the console. "Is it a smuggler? Tell them the docking fees went up by 10%. "Negative. It is not a smuggler. It is massive. The displacement tonnage is reading off the scale." Jace tapped the console, bringing up the sensor feed. The screen flickered, struggling to interpret the data, washing over the station's primitive receivers. He narrowed his eyes. Most mechanics would see static. Jace saw the mathematical shape of the distortion. He saw a flux wake that was bleeding energy, a drive core that was screaming in agony. And he saw the silhouette. It emerged from the dark like a predator, stepping out of the tree line. It was huge, a sleek, predatory dagger of silver and obsidian metal, easily 2 kilometers long. The design was unmistakable. It did not have the blocky utilitarian aesthetic of human ships. It flowed. It looked like a beast caught mid-leap, frozen in alloy. "Fenrin," Jace whispered. The hair on his arm stood up. That is a Fenrir heavy cruiser. Incorrect, Russ said. I am cross-referencing with the public database. That is not a cruiser, Jace. That is a Dreadnought-class flagship. Specifically, the Silver Howl. Jace froze. The Silver Howl. The Imperial flagship. The seat of the Wolf Empress herself. It was the kind of ship you saw on news feeds, usually hovering over a burning planet, or leading a victory parade. It was not supposed to be drifting sideways in the frontier belt, leaking plasma like a wounded animal. They are hailing us, Rust said. Audio only, broad spectrum. Put it through, the speakers hissed, and then a voice cut through the static. It was deep, guttural, and strained. This is a high-guard vessel, Silver Howl. We have sustained critical drive failure. Our flux heart is destabilizing. We request immediate emergency docking. Respond. Jace stared at the screen. A ship that size with a destabilizing core was not a guest. It was a bomb. If that flux heart went critical while docked, Gallows Reach would be vaporized. There would not even be dust left to mourn him. Jace, Rust warned. Structural integrity of docking arm 1 is suspect. That ship outweighs us by a factor of 1,000. If we say no, Jace said, his mind racing, they blow up out there and the radiation wave cooks us anyway. If we say yes, at least we might get paid before we die. He hit the comm stud. Unknown vessel, this is Gallows Reach Station. You are way over my weight limit, but I am opening docking arm 1. Come in slow. If you nudge the pylon, you are paying for the paint. Acknowledged, the voice replied, sounding insulted that a scrap rat would worry about paint when a flagship was dying. Jace watched the massive vessel approach. It was beautiful and terrifying. The hull plates were etched with runic script that glowed with a faint lunar luminescence. But Jace's eyes skipped the art and went to the damage. The aft section was scorched. The venting ports were rhythmic, pulsing like a panicked heartbeat. He read the energy output fluctuations on his screen. A normal mechanic would see chaos. Jace saw the pattern. The code governing the magnetic containment field was looping. It was a recursive error eating its own tail. Sloppy, Jace muttered to himself. Someone tried to overclock the lattice and tripped the failsafe. He grabbed his tool belt. It was heavy, weighted down with a hydrospanner, a laser cutter, and a diagnostic data pad that he had illegally jailbroken 10 years ago. Rust, keep the airlock sealed until I give the word. I do not want an invasion force. I just want customers. You are wearing the coveralls with the hole in the knee, Rust observed. I am a janitor of the void, Rust. I am not dressing up for royalty. The airlock cycled with a groan of protesting metal. Steam vented from the pressure equalizers swirling in the cold air of the docking bay. Jace stood alone in the center of the bay, his arms crossed, leaning against a stack of crates labeled hazardous waste. The heavy blast doors of the Silver Howl retracted. The first thing that hit him was the smell. It was not the sterile scent of human ships. It was musk sharp and primal, mixed with a tang of high-grade starship fuel and expensive leather. Soldiers poured out. They moved with a fluid, lethal grace that made human Marines look like stumbling toddlers. They wore armor of matte black composite, articulated to allow for full range of motion. And they were clearly Fenrir, tall, broad-shouldered. Under the helmets, Jace could see the jut of muzzles, the gleam of yellow eyes. Pointed ears twitched atop their heads, swiveling toward the sound of the station's ventilation fans. They formed a defensive perimeter in seconds. Weapons raised plasma rifles that looked like they cost more than Jace's entire station. A figure strode through the ranks. He was massive, his armor adorned with silver braiding. He removed his helmet, revealing a face covered in short, graying fur. A scar ran from his left ear down to his jaw. His eyes were amber and filled with unadulterated contempt as he surveyed the rusted walls of the docking bay. This was Commander Rauk. Jace recognized the rank insignia from newscasts, Chief of Imperial Security, a man known for lacking a sense of humor. Rauk stopped 3 meters from Jace, looking down at his snout. Who is in charge of this facility? You are looking at him, Jace said. He did not salute. He did not bow. He scratched his chin where the stubble was itching. Welcome to Gallows Reach. Sorry about the mess. The maid is on strike. Rauch's ears flattened against his skull. A low growl vibrated in his chest. We require a secure diplomatic suite for the Alpha. We need a strategy room with secure comms. We need a decontamination chamber for the entourage. And I demand to speak to your station commander, not a grease monkey. Jace blinked slowly. Okay, let me check the inventory. Secure suite, I have got a cabin in Block C with a lock that works 50% of the time. Strategy room. The mess hall is empty between 2 and 4 in the morning. Decontamination. There is a sonic shower in the gym, but it shuts off if you stand still too long. And regarding the commander, Jace pointed a thumb at his own chest. I am the owner, the commander, the head engineer, and the guy who unclogs the toilets. Jace Harlan. Nice to meet you. Rauch looked ready to draw his sidearm and execute Jace for insolence. This is unacceptable. The Empress cannot be housed in a scrap heap. Then feel free to undock, Jace said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the humor. But, looking at your drive signature, your flux heart has about 3 hours before it goes supernova. So you can be high and mighty dust, or you can be alive guests in a scrap heap. Your call, Commander. Rauch took a step forward, his hand twitching toward his hip. The soldiers behind him tensed a ripple of movement like a single organism. Stand down, Rauch! The voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension like a monofilament wire. It carried a weight that made the air in the bay feel suddenly heavier. The soldiers parted instantly, dropping to one knee, heads bowed. Even Rauch stiffened and stepped aside, lowering his gaze. Empress Nyra Fenra stepped onto the rust-stained deck of Gallows Reach. She was taller than Jace, though not as bulky as her guards. She did not wear armor. She wore a long coat of deep midnight blue, trimmed with silver fur adorned with the sigil of the moonpack, a howling wolf silhouetted against a crescent moon. Beneath the coat, she wore a fitted tunic and trousers that looked functional, almost military. But it was her face that held Jace. She was undeniably alien, yet startlingly expressive. Her skin was fair-dusted, with a faint silvery down along the jawline and cheekbones. Her ears, black with silver tips, stood alert, swiveling slightly, to catch the hum of the station. Her hair was a cascading mane of black, braided with silver wire. Her eyes were gold. Not the amber of Rauch, but a deep, burnished gold like molten starlight. They were eyes that had seen star systems burn, and treaties signed. They were old eyes with a young face. She stopped in front of Jace. The smell of her was distinct winter air, crushed pine needles, and something electric. Jace had spent 10 years hiding from the universe, convincing himself he was nobody. But when Nyra looked at him, he felt a sudden, terrifying vertigo. It felt as if she was not looking at his dirty coveralls, or his unshaven face. It felt as if she was reading the code of his DNA. You are the master of this station, she asked. Her common was perfect, with a slight rolling accent on the R's. I am, Jace said. He found himself standing straighter, fighting the urge to wipe his hands on his pants again. Jace Harlan. I am Nyra Fenra, she said. She did not say Empress. She did not say Your Highness, just the name. My ship is dying, Jace Harlan, and I am told you are the only surgeon within 10 light years. I am a mechanic, Jace corrected. I fix trash compactors and hyperdrive shunts for smugglers. I do not work on Imperial flagships. That tech is classified. If I touch it, your friend Rauch will probably shoot me. Nyra glanced at Rauch. The commander stiffened but remained silent. She looked back at Jace. The Silver Howl was sabotaged. Someone introduced a parasitic algorithm into the Flux Heart during a diplomatic summit. It is eating the containment field. Our engineers are incapacitated or loyal to the wrong people. I have a skeleton crew of guards and pilots. I have no flux specialist. She took a step closer. The height difference forced Jace to look up slightly. "If the heart fails," she said quietly, so only he could hear, "the explosion will trigger a chain reaction in your local nebula. This entire sector will be sterilized. You are not just fixing my ship to save a Queen Jace. You are fixing it so you do not turn into ash." Jace looked at her. He saw the desperation hidden behind the gold walls of her eyes. He saw a leader who was cornered bleeding and surrounded by wolves of her own kind who wanted her dead. He let out a long, ragged sigh. "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "When you put it that way, I guess I can clear my schedule." He gestured toward the massive airlock door leading into the station. "Welcome to Gallows Reach, Your Highness. Try not to step on the rats. They are the only pets I am allowed to have." The interior of the Silver Howl was a cathedral of technology. Jace walked alongside Naira, with Rauk and 2 guards trailing 3 steps behind. The corridors were wide lit by soft bioluminescent strips running along the walls. The air here was clean scrubbed of all impurities, but underneath Jace could feel the vibration. The deck plates hummed with a sickly, irregular rhythm. The ship was shivering. "The sabotage was subtle," Naira explained as they walked. She had shed the heavy ceremonial coat, handing it to a subordinate. Now in her tunic she looked less like a figurehead and more like a soldier. Her movements were efficient. "We did not notice the efficiency drop until we tried to jump to hyperspace. The flux heart rejected the transition geometry. Then the heat spikes started." "It sounds like a cascade failure," Jace said. He was looking at the walls, but his mind was already visualizing the engine core. "Someone fed the computer a logic loop. It thinks it needs to draw more power to maintain stability, but the extra power creates more instability, so it draws more power. Positive feedback loop. Classic. Deadly." "You sound confident for a scrap merchant," Rauk growled from behind. "I read a lot of manuals," Jace said dryly. "And I have fixed a lot of idiots' mistakes. Physics is the same whether it is in a garbage scow or a palace." They reached the engineering deck. The blast doors were sealed, glowing with red warning runes. "The radiation levels inside are high," Naira warned. "Safe for us for short periods. Dangerous for a human." "I have taken my iodine pills," Jace said. "Open it." The doors hissed open. The heat hit them first, a dry, oppressive wave that tasted of copper. In the center of the vast spherical chamber, the flux heart hung suspended in a magnetic cradle. It was magnificent. A sphere of pure, swirling energy, white-hot and violent, trapped within a cage of silver alloy ribs, the Howl conduits. But the sphere was lopsided. It pulsed erratically, sending spasms of light through the conduits. Arcs of lightning lashed out, striking the containment walls. Jace walked to the main control console. The Fenrin script scrolled across the screens, a waterfall of amber symbols. "I cannot read this," Jace lied. "Translate the core logic to standard binary." Nira stepped up beside him. Her presence was distracting the heat of her body, the sharp scent of her. She tapped a command sequence. The screen shifted, displaying the raw code in columns of zeros and ones interspersed with geometric logic gates. Jace leaned in. He narrowed his eyes. He let the world around him fade, the heat, the Empress, the angry wolf commander. There was only the code. He scrolled through the diagnostic logs. His eyes darted back and forth, tracking the flow of data. He saw the spikes. He saw the moment the sabotage had triggered. And then he froze. His hand hovered over the screen. His heart hammered against his ribs, a sudden violent thudding that had nothing to do with the radiation. He knew this architecture. The way the flux lattice managed the energy distribution, the specific geometric folding of the spatial dimensions, was not standard Fenrin design. It was a hybrid. It was elegant, daring, and incredibly complex. It was his design. It was the Harlan flux lattice. The revolutionary engine architecture he had proposed to the Auric Reach Engineering Council 12 years ago. The design they had laughed at. The design they had called unstable, dangerous and heretical. The design that had gotten his license revoked and his name blacklisted across the core systems. They had told him it was garbage. They had destroyed his career. And here it was powering the flagship of the alien Empress, stolen, adapted, and now broken. "Is something wrong?" Naira asked. She was watching him closely. Too closely. Jace forced his hand to stop shaking. He forced his face into a mask of bored concentration. He could not let them know. If Rauk knew that this human had designed the heart of their sacred ship, Jace would be interrogated and then executed to keep the secret. Or worse, dragged back to Auric Reach to explain why his failed tech was in enemy hands. "Just admiring the mess," Jace said, his voice raspy. "It is a mess, all right. Look here." He pointed to a block of code. "See this subroutine? It is a shadow command. It is telling the cooling pumps to cycle off for 1 millisecond every 10 seconds. Not enough to trigger an alarm, but enough to create thermal stress fractures in the containment glass. Over 2,000 cycles, the glass shatters. Boom." Nira leaned in her shoulder, brushing his arm. The contact sent a jolt through him. "Can you stop it?" "I can bypass it," Jace said. "But I have to do it manually. I have to go into the conduit access tunnel and physically rewire the shunt while you purge the code from the console. If we mistime it by half a second, the feedback will fry me and then blow the ship." "I will handle the console," Naira said instantly. "Your Highness," Rauk barked. "You cannot. That is mechanic work. It is beneath you." Naira turned on him. Her lips peeled back slightly, revealing elongated canines. A low, resonant growl emerged from her throat, a sound of pure dominance that made Jace's knees instinctually want to buckle. "This is my ship, Rauk. This is my pack. If the heart stops beating, we all die. I do not care about protocol. I care about survival." She turned back to Jace, her eyes burning. "I will be on the keys. You are in the tunnel. Do not miss your cue, Jace Harlan." Jace managed a crooked grin. "I never miss, Your Highness. I just occasionally aim at the wrong thing." He grabbed his tool bag and headed for the access hatch beneath the pulsing heart of the ship. The access tunnel was tight, hot, and loud. The roar of the flux heart was a physical weight pressing against Jace's chest. He crawled on his elbows, dragging the tool bag. Sweat stung his eyes. He reached the junction box for the cooling shunt. It was vibrating so hard, his teeth rattled. "I am in position," Jace yelled into his comms bead. "Can you hear me?" Loud and clear, Naira's voice came back. It was calm, steady, an anchor in the storm. "I am accessing the root directory. The security ice is thick. Whoever wrote this sabotage knew my clearance codes." "It was an inside job," Jace said, prying the cover off the junction box. "Someone who wants you to fail. Someone who thinks a peace-loving Empress is a weak Empress." There was a pause. "You surmise a lot for a mechanic," Naira said. "I listened to the news," Jace lied again. He began stripping the wires. They were optical fibers glowing with blue light. "Okay, I see the bypass loop. I am going to cut it. On my mark, you need to execute a hard reset on the thermal regulator. If you do it too early, the pumps stall. Too late, and the backflow hits me." "I am ready," Naira said. "Trust me." Trust. A funny word to hear from a wolf Empress. 3, Jace counted. He positioned the laser cutter. 2. His hand was steady. It was always steady when it mattered. 1, mark. He severed the fiber. Instantly the tunnel screamed. A blast of superheated steam vented from the release valve above him. Jace curled into a ball, shielding his face, letting his insulated suit take the burn. The ship shuddered violently, a groan of metal that sounded like a dying leviathan. Then silence. Or rather, the roar subsided to a steady rhythmic thrum. The vibration smoothed out. The heat began to dissipate. "Regulator reset completely," Naira's voice came through breathless, but triumphant. "Flux heart is stabilizing. Thermal stress is dropping. 90%, 80% we are in the green. Jace exhaled, slumping against the tunnel wall. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. That was fun. Let us not do it again. Jace, Naira said softly. Yeah. Thank you. He crawled out of the tunnel 10 minutes later. He was covered in soot grease and coolant fluid. He looked like a wreck. Naira was waiting for him. She had a smudge of oil on her cheek right beneath her left eye. It made her look impossibly human. She extended a hand to help him up. He hesitated, looking at his filthy glove, then took it. Her grip was iron-strong. You have good hands, Jace Harlan, she said, not letting go immediately. For a moment when the flux destabilized, I saw you shift the modulation. You anticipated the surge before the sensors did. How? Jace pulled his hand away gently. He picked up his bag. I told you. Experience. Old ships have creaky joints. You just have to know where to listen. Naira studied with him. Her gaze was penetrating, peeling back the layers of his deflection. Perhaps. Or perhaps Gallows Reach is hiding something more valuable than scrap. Rauk stepped forward, interrupting the moment. The ship is stable. We should prepare to depart immediately. We are vulnerable here. The ship is stable, Jace corrected, but the sabotage code is still buried in the deeper clusters. I cut the wire, but I did not kill the virus. If you jump to FTL now, it will rewrite itself and blow you up halfway to the Dominion. Rauk snarled. He is lying. He wants to keep us here to extort more credits. I do not need your money that badly, Jace snapped. Look at the diagnostic. The lattice is compromised. I need at least 24 hours to scrub the code line by line. And I need to do it from here hooked into my station's mainframe, so I can run simulations without risking your core. Naira looked at Rauk, then at Jace. She made a decision. We stay, she stated. Commander set up a perimeter around the station. No one comes in or out. Jace will have full access to the engineering systems. But Your Highness, Rauk protested. That is an order, Rauk. Go. Rauk glared at Jace with enough hatred to melt steel, then turned and marched out. Naira turned back to Jace. 24 hours, Jace. Can you save my ship in 24 hours? Jace looked at the schematic of the Flux Heart, his masterpiece stolen and broken. He looked at the Empress, who was entrusting her life to him. I will try, Jace said, but I charge extra for overtime. Naira smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of her lips, but it transformed her face. It was not a wolf's snarl. It was a woman's amusement. I think the Dominion can afford your rates, she said. As she walked away to issue orders to her crew, Jace watched her go. He felt a strange tightening in his chest, a sensation he had not felt since the days before his exile. It felt like purpose. He looked down at the console, at the complex, beautiful geometry of the lattice he had created so long ago. Hello, old friend, he whispered to the code. Let us see what they did to you. Outside, the coolant leak in Sector 4 continued its rhythm. Drop, hiss, silence. But for the first time in 3 years, Jace Harlan did not hear it. The heart of the Silver Howl was not a machine. It was a captive star screaming in a cage of silver and glass. Jace stood on the catwalk overlooking the primary containment chamber. The air here was thick, tasting of copper and charged ozone. In the center of the spherical room, the Flux Heart pulsed. It was a sphere of blinding white energy, suspended within a lattice of 12 curved pylons, the Howl conduits. They looked like the ribs of a leviathan, arching around the precious volatile core. Every 3 seconds the light spasmed. A vein of sickly violet energy would shoot through the white, and the deck plates beneath Jace's boots would shudder. It is worse than the sensors indicated, Jace said, his voice flat. He was already mentally dismantling the containment field, calculating the stress points. The harmonic resonance is off by 12%. If that variance hits 15%, the magnetic bottle shatters. Beside him, Empress Naira Fenra did not speak immediately. She was busy dismantling her own image. She reached up and unclasped the heavy midnight blue cloak that draped over her shoulders. It fell to the deck with a heavy thud, pooling like spilled ink. Next came the silver circlet that rested against her ears. She handed it to a terrified-looking attendant and dismissed him with a sharp nod. Underneath the regalia, Naira wore a bodysuit of matte gray tactical weave, reinforced with leather at the joints. It was the uniform of a field engineer or a shock trooper, scarred and worn from use. She pulled a pair of heavy, insulated gauntlets from a belt pouch and snapped them on. The sound was loud in the sudden quiet of the room. "Rauk thinks a ruler should only hold a scepter," Naira said, flexing her fingers. The metal knuckles of the gauntlets gleamed. "But in the old packs, the Alpha was the one who forged the weapons. I do not intend to break that tradition." She looked at Jace. The golden intensity of her eyes was no longer haughty. It was clinical. She was assessing him not as a subject, but as a tool in the kit. "We have 4 hours before the thermal buildup triggers a hard lockdown," she stated. "Standard Fenrin doctrine dictates we shut down the outer 3 rings and purge the coolant manually." Jace snorted, swinging his tool bag off his shoulder. "Standard doctrine is great if you have a full shipyard and a week of leave. We have neither. If you purge the coolant now, the thermal shock will crack the injectors. We are not shutting it down. We are performing open-heart surgery while the patient is running a marathon." Naira's ears twitched, swiveling back. "That is reckless. The flux heart relies on rhythmic stability. Disruption invites chaos." "Chaos is just an order you have not figured out yet," Jace countered. He slid down the ladder to the main access platform, moving with a careless agility that belied the danger. "Are you coming, Your Highness? Or are you going to quote the manual while we vaporize?" Naira bared her teeth in a fleeting sharp grin. She vaulted over the railing, dropping 3 meters to the platform beside him. She landed silently. "Lead the way, Scrap Rat," she said. They worked in a rhythm that was dissonant, yet strangely effective. Naira moved like a dancer performing a sacred rite. Every bolt she turned, every command she keyed into the console was precise. She murmured low, guttural phrases in the Fenrin tongue as she worked mnemonics for the firing order of the magnetic pistons. It was engineering as religion. She respected the machine, treating the flux heart like a living beast that needed to be soothed. Jace was the opposite. He was a whirlwind of jury-rigged solutions and percussive maintenance. He bypassed safety interlocks that were slowing them down. He used a magnet stuck to the end of a screwdriver to trick a sensor into thinking a valve was closed so he could work on it while it was open. "You are bypassing the secondary harmonic damper," Naira warned, her voice tight with stress, as she monitored the flow on her datapad. "That violates 3 separate safety protocols." "Those protocols assume the damper is working," Jace grunted. He was waist-deep in an access hatch, his voice echoing. "It is not. It is rusted shut. I am routing the signal through the auxiliary lighting circuit." "Through the lights?" Naira sounded horrified. "Electricity does not care what you call the wire, just that it has a path," Jace said. He rolled out of the hatch, wiping grease across his forehead, leaving a black smear. "Try it now." Naira hesitated, then keyed the sequence. The violet spasm in the core smoothed out into a steady, rhythmic pulse. The violent shuddering of the deck ceased, replaced by a low, consistent hum. She stared at the readout. "Efficiency is up by 7%. The bypass is holding." She looked at Jace, her head tilted to the side, curiosity warring with disbelief. "That was elegant, in a barbaric sort of way." "Barbaric elegance is my specialty," Jace said. He stood up, cracking his back. "But that was just a symptom. Now we find the disease." They moved to the central logic core, a pillar of obsidian glass that housed the ship's governing intelligence. Jace plugged his battered diagnostic deck into the pristine Fenran port. "Show me the code injection," Jace muttered. His fingers flew across his own cracked screen. "Here," Naira pointed. She leaned over his shoulder. The heat of the core was intense, but Jace felt a different kind of heat radiating from her. She smelled of ozone and concentration. This block. It looks like a standard power shunt algorithm. Jace squinted at the scrolling lines of data. It looks like one, but it is not. Look at the timestamp. This command loops every 40 milliseconds. He highlighted the section. It is an optimizer, a fake one. It tells the Flux heart that it is running at 90% capacity, when it is actually at 110%. It is like giving the engine a stimulant and cutting the pain receptors. The ship feels great right up until its heart explodes. It forces the engine to burn itself out to maintain appearances, Naira said softly. The realization darkened her face. It is insidious. If the ship exploded, the black box would just show pilot error pushing the engines too hard. Whoever wrote this knew exactly how you fly, Jay said. He looked at her. They knew you pushed your tech to the limit. They weaponized your own competence against you. Naira turned away, pacing the small platform. Her tail lashed behind her, betraying her agitation. I upgraded the Silver Howl 6 months ago. I integrated new lattice designs to increase our range to reduce our reliance on the fuel depots controlled by the High Council. Only 3 master engineers and the Council Lords knew the specifications. Tell me about this council, Jay said. He pulled a rag from his pocket and began cleaning his hydro spanner, watching her. Naira stopped pacing. She looked into the blinding white light of the core. The Fenrin Dominion is a union of clans. For 1,000 years we expanded by consuming. We hunted weaker systems, took their resources, and moved on. We are predators. It is in our biology. She turned to face him. But the universe is changing. The prey is fighting back. Resources are thinning. I proposed a new path. The Treaty of the Twin Suns. Trade instead of conquest. Technology sharing with the human systems. Integration. And the wolves did not like being told to eat vegetables, Jace summarized. The High Council of Clans sees it as weakness, Naira said, her voice dropping to a growl. They call me the toothless bitch behind closed doors. They think I am betraying the pack instinct. They want to remove me, but they cannot challenge me to a duel because I am the blood heir. So they try to make me fail. If the flagship explodes, or if I disappear in the frontier, Lord Regent Calder Thorn steps in to restore order. Thorn, Jace tested the name. Sounds like a pleasant guy. He believes that peace is just a pause between wars, Naira said. He wants to burn the frontier belt to fuel the war machine, including your station, Jace. The heavy blast doors at the far end of the walkway hissed open. Commander Rauk strode in. He was fully armored, his helmet tucked under his arm. The heat of the room did not seem to bother him, or perhaps his rage was simply hotter. He marched up to the platform, his boots clanking heavily. He ignored Jace entirely, focusing his amber gaze on Naira. Your Highness, Rauk barked. This has gone on long enough. We are sitting ducks in this gravity well. The fleet is scattered. We must jump to the rally point immediately. We cannot jump, Rauk, Naira said calmly. The drive is open. We are scrubbing the logic lattice. Rauk turned his sneer toward Jace. This human is delaying us. Every hour we sit here is an hour my security perimeter is tested. I do not trust him. He is a scavenger. Who is to say he is not planting more viruses? Who is to say he is not selling our position to the highest bidder? Jace did not look up from his screen. If I wanted to kill you, Rauk, I would just turn off the magnetic containment field for 0.5 seconds. You would be a shadow burnt onto the wall before your brain registered the heat. Rauk's hand dropped to the plasma pistol at his hip. You insolent cur. You should what? Jace interrupted. He finally looked up, his eyes cold and hard. Shoot the only guy who knows why your ship is trying to commit suicide. Go ahead. Pull the trigger. Then explain to your Empress why she is stuck in a drift with a corpse and a broken engine. Rauk took a step forward, towering over Jace. If you do anything that harms this pack, I will tear that station of yours apart rivet by rivet. And I will start with you. Jace stood his ground. He was a head shorter and half the weight, but he leaned in. If this flagship blows, Commander, you will not have time to be angry. You will just be expanding gas. So let me do my job, and you go stand guard and look scary. You are good at that. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Rauch's jaw muscles bunched. Enough, Naira's voice cracked like a whip. Rauch, return to the bridge. Monitor the long-range sensors. If I see a single ship entering the system, I want to know. Dismissed. Rauch held Jace's gaze for 1 second longer, a promise of violence deferred before bowing stiffly to Naira and storming out. Jace let out a long breath he had been holding. Charming fellow. Does he do children's parties? He is loyal, Naira said, watching the door close. But his loyalty is to the throne, not necessarily to the woman sitting on it. He fears change, and I represent nothing but change. An hour later, the diagnostic subroutine was only 40% complete. The waiting was the hardest part. Jace sat on the edge of the platform, his legs dangling over the abyss of machinery below. Naira sat next to him close enough that he could feel the warmth of her arm. The initial barrier of rank had eroded, worn down by the shared sweat and danger of the last few hours. Jace fished 2 foil-wrapped bars from his pocket. He tossed one to her. Dinner is served, he said. Protein bar flavor unknown. I think it is supposed to be an apple, but it tastes like despair. Naira caught it with reflex speed. She tore it open with her teeth, a small feral gesture that fascinated Jace, and took a bite. She chewed thoughtfully. It has texture, she admitted. Like dried clay. That is the luxury line, Jace grinned, taking a bite of his own. I save those for guests. They ate in silence for a moment, the hum of the flux heart filling the space between them. You live alone here, Naira said. It was not a question. Why a mechanic with your skill? You could work in the core systems. You could work for the Auric Reach Corporation. They pay fortunes for flux specialists. Jace's chewing slowed. The mention of Auric Reach was a phantom pain, an old wound aching in the cold. I do not like crowds, he deflected. And corporate life involves too many meetings. I prefer machines. Machines do not lie to you. They do not smile at you while they sign orders to destroy your life. Loneliness is a heavy cloak to wear, Naira said softly. She was looking at the ration bar, turning it over in her gloved hands. I am surrounded by 1,000 people every day. Guards, advisors, suitors, servants. But I have not spoken to anyone who just answered me. Without calculating the political cost of their words, she looked at him. It is a different kind of silence. You are alone because no one is there. I am alone because everyone is watching a performance. The view is better from where you are standing, Jace said. Is it? Naira asked. From where I stand, I see only people waiting for me to fall. She shifted, and her hand brushed against his, where it rested on the grate. It was accidental, fleeting. But neither of them pulled away immediately. Jace felt a jolt, not static electricity, but something deeper, a resonance. Like 2 isolated systems, suddenly finding a connection. He looked at her hand. The fingers were long, strong, tipped with short, dark claws. It was a hand that could kill resting next to his hand, which only knew how to fix things. Well, Jace said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. You are not falling today. Not on my watch. The console beeped, shattering the moment. Diagnostic complete on Sector 7, the automated voice chirped. They both pulled back, the connection broken, but the air still charged with it. Jace cleared his throat, standing up too quickly. Right. Sector 7. Let us see what we have. He pulled up the schematic for the physical hardware of the Howl conduits. The digital wireframe rotated in the air above the console. Jace zoomed in on the tertiary, coupling the physical anchor that held the magnetic field in place. Wait, Jace said, frowning. That cannot be right. He tapped the screen. Magnify the stress tolerance on coupling 3. The image expanded. The metal strut, which should have been a solid bar of durasteel alloy, showed microscopic striations. "It has been shaved," Jace whispered. "Look at the thickness. It is 2 millimeters under spec. Someone took a laser file to it." Naira stared at the image, her face hardening into stone. Shaving 2 millimeters would not cause a failure immediately. "No," Jace said, his mind racing. "It creates a harmonic weakness, like a wine glass. It holds water fine until an opera singer hits the exact right note. Then it shatters." He looked at the frequency readouts. The fake optimization code forces the engine to vibrate at exactly the frequency needed to shatter this coupling. It is a two-key system. The code is the hammer, and this shaved strut is the nail. "Physical sabotage," Naira hissed. That means the saboteur was on board," Jace finished. "Someone in the maintenance crew, or someone with clearance to be in the dock during the refit." Naira slammed her fist onto the railing. The metal rang. "They did not just want to disable the ship. They wanted it to look like a structural failure, to prove that my new designs were flawed, to prove I am incompetent." Jace stared at the rotating schematic, the hybrid design, the way the flux folded space, the specific geometry of the lattice. He knew this design. He knew it down to his marrow. It was the Harlan flux lattice. It was the design he had drawn on a napkin 12 years ago in a bar on Mars. The design he had spent 3 years perfecting. The design he had presented to the Auric Reach Board of Directors. The design they had called unstable heresy. Right before they stripped him of his rank, blackened his file, and blacklisted him from every shipyard in human space. They had told him it was impossible. They had told him it was dangerous. And now here it was. Inside an alien flagship. Auric Reach had not destroyed his work. They had stolen it. They had sold it to the Fenrin Dominion, or at least to the faction that built this ship. Jace felt the blood drain from his face. His hands started to tremble, and he gripped the console to steady himself. If Naira knew, if she knew he was the architect of this technology, what would she do? Would she see him as the savior? Or would she see him as the source of the flaw? And if the High Council or Auric Reach found out he was here alive and touching the evidence of their theft, Jace Harlan would cease to exist. He would just be another tragic accident in the frontier. "Jace," Naira's voice cut through his panic. "You have gone pale. What is it?" Jace swallowed hard. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth, but it was a necessary shield. "It is the vibration," he stammered. "It is getting worse. If that coupling snaps, the magnetic bottle opens. We have maybe 2 hours before the resonance hits the critical note." He looked at her. He saw the trust in her eyes, trust he had not earned, trust built on a lie of omission. "I need to reinforce that strut," Jace said, his voice steadying. "I need to weld a counterweight onto it to change its resonant frequency. If I change the pitch, the glass will not break." "That requires entering the conduit while the field is active," Naira said. "The radiation." "I have taken my pills," Jace repeated, though he knew pills would not stop the nausea that would come later. "It is the only way. We break the harmony, we save the ship." Naira looked at him for a long moment. She reached out and took his chin in her hand, turning his face so he had to look directly into her eyes. The contact was electric, terrifyingly intimate. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "You could walk away. You could eject the core and let the ship die. You owe me nothing." Jace looked at her. He thought of the stolen designs. He thought of the 10 years of silence. He thought of the way she had eaten his terrible food and treated him like a man, not a mechanic. "I do not like seeing good work destroyed," Jace said, and that part was true. "And I do not like bullies, whether they are human corporations or wolf lords." Naira released him. She stood tall, her silhouette stark against the blinding light of the core. "Commander Rauk!" she bellowed into her comms unit. "Rauk here," the voice crackled back, resentful. "Lock down the ship. We are entering a critical repair phase. I am declaring a code black. Total communication silence. No signals in or out. The Silver Howl is now a closed system. Your Highness, Rauk protested. That isolates us completely. Exactly, Naira said. Until this ship is fixed, we are ghosting. And Rauk, send a squad to the engineering airlock. But they are to stand guard outside. Inside, Jace Harlan has absolute authority. If he asks for a wrench, you give him a wrench. If he asks for the crown jewels to use as a hammer, you hand them to him. Is that clear? There was a sullen silence, then a clipped, understood. Naira cut the channel. She turned to Jace. You have the con architect, she said. The word made Jace flinch internally. Architect. She did not know how right she was. All right, Jace said, picking up the laser welder. Let us change the tune of this song. He stepped toward the airlock of the conduit, knowing that he was stepping further into a web that could strangle him. But as he looked back at the Wolf Empress who stood guarding the door with her gauntleted fists clenched, Jace realized something terrifying. He did not just want to save the ship. He wanted to save her. And for a man who had spent a decade trying not to care about anything, that was the most dangerous malfunction of all. Wait for my signal, Jace said, stepping into the blinding white. I am right here, Naira whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the captive star. I am not going anywhere. The Silver Howl was waking up. It did not wake like a machine with the cold boot-up of servers and the flickering of lights. It woke like a predator, shaking off a long winter sleep. The hum in the deck plates deepened, shifting from a rattle of sickness to a purr of contained power. The bioluminescent strips along the walls flared, changing from a dull, warning amber to a cool, predatory blue. Jace Harlan wiped a smear of thermal paste from his cheek and looked at the readout on the central console. Flux heart stability is at 92%, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion but steady. The harmonic bypass is holding. The lattice is reknitting itself. It is ugly, Your Highness. It is held together by digital duct tape and prayer. But it is running. Empress Naira Fenra stood on the other side of the console. She looked exhausted. Her tactical bodysuit was stained with coolant, and strands of her black hair had escaped their braids, framing a face that was fierce and undeniably beautiful. It is not ugly, she said, watching the swirling white energy of the core inside the containment field. It is alive. You have done the impossible, Jace. I did the improbable, Jace corrected, tapping a final command sequence. The impossible costs extra. Speaking of which, I am adding a hazard pay surcharge for the radiation. My future children will probably glow in the dark. Naira let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound that was becoming less rare between them. If we survive this, the Dominion will pay you enough to buy your own planet. You can glow in the dark in comfort. I do not want a planet, Jace murmured, watching the flux lines stabilize. I just want a nap, and maybe a sandwich that does not taste like recycled cardboard. Captain, the comms channel crackled. It was Commander Rauk from the bridge. His voice was tense, stripped of its usual disdain. We have green lights on the sublight maneuvering thrusters. Shields are cycling to 30%, but the long-range sensors are picking up ghosts again. Jace froze. He looked at Naira. The playfulness vanished from her eyes, instantly replaced by the gold, hard gaze of the Alpha. Define ghosts, Rauk, she ordered. Signatures emerging from the nebula drift, Rauk replied. 3 vessels, no transponder codes. They are moving in attack formation. Interceptor vectors locked on Gallows Reach. Show me, Naira commanded. The holographic display above the flux heart flickered and changed. Instead of the engine diagnostics, it showed the tactical plot of the local space. 3 red daggers were burning through the sensor fog. They were Fenran ships, but they were jagged, scarred, and painted in the matte black of Void Hunters. They did not move with the grace of the Royal Fleet. They moved with the aggressive, erratic twitch of a pack that had smelled blood. War pack, Naira whispered. The fur on her ears stood straight up. Those are bloodletter-class frigates. They belong to the fringe clans loyal to Lord Regent Thorn. They found us, Jace said. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. How we were running silent. The sabotage, Naira realized. The efficiency virus was not just breaking the ship. It was broadcasting a subsonic distress beacon on a frequency only they monitor. We have been screaming about our location for 2 days. Hail them, Naira barked into the comms. Open a channel. The main screen on the wall hissed, resolving into the image of a bridge much darker and dirtier than the Silver Howl. A Fenrin male sat in the captain's chair. He was old, his muzzle scarred, one eye replaced by a crude cybernetic implant that glowed red. This is War Master Krail of the Iron Fang clan, the wolf growled. His voice sounded like grinding stones. We tracked a distress signal from the royal flagship. We are here to assist. Assist, Naira's voice was ice. You are approaching with weapons hot and shields raised. That is not assistance, Krail. That is an execution vector. Krail smiled, revealing yellowed fangs. The frontier is dangerous, Empress. We must be ready for pirates. We are here to escort you back to the capital. Lord Regent Thorn is very worried about your health. He fears you are unfit to lead. I am fit enough to bury you, Krail, Naira said. Stand down. Break formation and hold position at 10,000 kilometers. If you cross the perimeter, I will consider it an act of treason. Krail laughed. It was a barking, ugly sound. Your ship is bleeding, Empress. We can smell it. You have no main gun. Your shields are paper. Surrender the ship. Surrender the human station. Or we will turn both into debris and tell the Council you died in a tragic accident. We are charging main batteries, Krail added. You have 2 minutes. The screen went black. 2 minutes, Jace said, looking at the tactical map. Shields at 30%. We cannot take a hit from a frigate, let alone 3. And we definitely cannot shoot back. The main weapon array draws power directly from the flux heart. If we fire a full blast now, the lattice will shatter. We do not surrender, Naira said. She turned to Jace. Can you give me more shield power? I can divert life support, Jace said, his fingers flying across the keys. I can cut the gravity on the lower decks. That gets us maybe 40%. It buys us 2 minutes of survival, not a victory. Suddenly, the deck lurched beneath them. It was not an explosion. It was a vibration, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to come from inside their own bones. The flux heart screamed. The sphere of white energy turned a violent, bruising purple. Arcs of lightning thick as tree trunks lashed out, smashing against the containment glass. The howl conduits groaned, the metal heating up instantly to a dull, cherry red. What is happening? Naira shouted over the roar of the engine. We fixed this, the bypass was holding. Jace stared at the screen. His face went ashen. It is the third layer, he yelled back. The sabotage had a sleeper agent. It was waiting for a specific external signal. Krail's scanning beam carried a coded frequency. It just woke up the kill switch. The readout was scrolling red text faster than the eye could follow. Critical resonance. Lattice failure imminent. Containment breach in 60 seconds. It is a resonance cascade, Jace explained, his voice rising in panic. The virus is shaking the heart apart from the inside. It is matching the vibrational frequency of the magnetic bottle. It is trying to shatter the glass. Can you stop it? I cannot stop physics, Jace snapped. He looked at the chaos. It is locked out. The code is encrypted with a rolling cipher. By the time I break it, we are dust. Outside, the first warning shot from the warpack slammed into the void shield of Gallows Reach. The station shook. Jace, Naira said. She grabbed his shoulder. Her grip was painful. Look at me, he looked. He saw fear, yes. But beneath the fear, he saw that same terrifying resolve. You are the best engineer I have ever seen, she said. You saw the pattern when no one else did. Do not fight the code, Jace. Rewrite it. Rewrite it. Jace looked back at the screen. He looked at the destructive, chaotic logic tearing the engine apart. He looked at the specific way the subroutines were curling around the energy flow. And suddenly, the panic vanished. It was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He recognized the kill switch. It was a corrupted version of the Harlan failsafe, a theoretical emergency vent he had designed for the original lattice. It was meant to dump energy safely in case of overload. But the saboteurs had inverted it. Instead of venting out, they were venting in. They were using his own genius to kill him. "You stole my work," Jace whispered to the unseen enemy. "And you did not even read the manual." He stopped typing commands to block the virus. Instead, he opened the core logic kernel, the forbidden root directory that no engineer was supposed to touch while the engine was active. "What are you doing?" Naira asked. "I am not fighting it," Jace said, his eyes scanning the lines of code that were etched into his memory from 12 years ago. "I am accepting the energy. They want resonance, fine. I will give them resonance." He began to type. He did not use the standard diagnostic tools. He used raw command line injections, bypassing the safety governors, rewriting the fundamental laws of how the flux heart handled power. He was not repairing the engine anymore. He was conducting it. "I need you to open the main weapon conduits," Jace yelled. "All of them, now." "The weapon conduits?" Naira stared at him. "Jace, we cannot fire. The recoil will blow the containment." "Do it!" Jace roared. "Trust me, Naira, open the throat of the wolf." Naira did not hesitate. She reached across the console and slammed her hand onto the weapon's release lever. "Conduits open. The main batteries are live, but empty." "Not for long," Jace muttered. Outside, the warpack closed in. "Target the station's command center," Krail ordered, on the bridge of the lead frigate. "Burn the rat out." A beam of concentrated plasma erupted from the frigate, screaming across the void. It slammed into the deflector shields of Gallows Reach. The station groaned. In the command center, screens exploded. Sparks showered down. "Shields failing," Rust screamed over the station speakers. "Structural integrity is critical." Back on the Silver Howl, the impact on the station resonated through the docking clamps. The ship shuddered. "Now," Jace said. He hit the enter key. He did not block the incoming resonance from the sabotage virus. Instead, he inverted the phase. He took the violent shaking energy that was trying to shatter the heart, and he poured it into the open weapon conduits. He used the sabotage as fuel. The flux heart turned from purple to a blinding, terrifying white. The screaming noise stopped, replaced by a sound that was felt rather than heard, a deep intake of breath. The energy that was about to destroy them was suddenly sucked out of the core and channeled into the gun barrels. "The core is stabilizing," Naira shouted, looking at the readouts in disbelief. "The energy pressure is dropping now. It is transferring. Jace, where are you putting that power?" "I am giving it back to them," Jace said through gritted teeth. "Tell the gunnery crews to fire. Mode Lunar Howl." "Lunar Howl." Naira looked at him. "That is a theoretical firing solution. It requires perfect synchronization." "You are the Empress," Jace said, looking at her sweat dripping down his nose. "Make them synchronize. Be the pack." Naira closed her eyes. She reached out not with her hands, but with her mind, tapping into the biofeedback interface of the command deck. She felt the ship. She felt the fear of the crew on the bridge. She felt the hesitation of the gunners. She felt the raw, chaotic power that Jace was wrangling in the engine room. She took a breath, and she howled. It was not a sound. It was a psionic command that rippled through the neural link of every Fenran on the ship. It was a command of absolute authority. "Focus. Strike. Now." "Fire!" Naira screamed. The Silver Howl unleashed its fury. From the forward oscillating cannons, 3 beams of pure white flux energy erupted. They were not the jagged red plasma of the enemy. They were solid lances of starlight, powered by the very sabotage, meant to destroy them. The beams crossed 10,000 kilometers in a heartbeat. They did not just hit Krail's frigates. They sang to them. The energy washed over the enemy shields, overwhelming their frequency modulators. The lead frigate, Krail's ship, took the hit amidships. The white light stripped away its shields, then its armor, then passed clean through the hull, severing the drivetrain from the reactor. The ship did not explode. It simply died. It went dark, drifting lifelessly. The other two frigates scrambled to evade, but the lunar howl was a wide-spectrum pulse. It fried their sensors, overloaded their targeting computers, and fused their weapon ports. In 3 seconds, the warpack went from predators to floating wreckage. "Direct hit," Rauch's voice came over the comms, stunned. "Enemy vessels are disabled. Life support is active on their ships, but they are drifting. They are helpless." In the engineering deck, the victory came with a price. The massive discharge of energy created a backdraft. The flux heart, empty and suddenly vacuumed of pressure, bucked violently in its cradle. "Backflow!" Jace screamed. "Get down!" He lunged for the manual cutoff switch, throwing his body across the console. A conduit overhead, unable to handle the rapid cooling, shattered. Shards of superheated crystal and a wave of concussive force exploded outward. Jace felt the impact like a sledgehammer to the chest. He was lifted off his feet and thrown backward, crashing hard against the railing. The world spun in a blur of light and pain. Darkness rushed in at the edges of his vision. He lay on the deck, gasping for air that would not come. His ears were ringing with a high-pitched whine. He could smell burning hair and the sharp tang of ozone. "Jace!" The voice was distant, panicked. He felt hands on him, strong hands. He was pulled up, not roughly, but with desperate urgency. Jace blinked, trying to clear the static from his eyes. Naira was there. She was kneeling over him, shielding him with her body. Debris was still raining down around them, sparks and bits of insulation, but she did not flinch. Her tactical suit was torn at the shoulder, revealing a graze that was bleeding slightly, but she did not seem to notice. Her helmet was gone. Her hair hung wild around her face. Her ears were flattened against her skull in distress. "Jace," she said again, her voice shaking. She ran her hands over his chest, checking for injuries. "Breathe. You have to breathe." Jace sucked in a jagged breath. His ribs screamed in protest, but the air filled his lungs. He coughed, tasting copper. "I am okay," he wheezed. "I think. Did we get them?" Naira looked down at him. Her golden eyes were wide, the pupils blown huge with adrenaline. "We got them," she whispered. "They are drifting. You neutralized the entire pack with one shot." Jace tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Good. Remind me to double the bill." He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness slammed him back down. Naira caught him supporting his head against her knee. "Stay down," she commanded softly. "You took a hard hit." They stayed there for a moment in the wreckage of the engineering deck. The flux heart was glowing a soft, stable blue, now the color of a calm sea. The red warning lights had vanished. The ship was silent, save for the hum of the engine and the ragged sound of their breathing. It was an intimate silence, a silence born of survival. Jace looked up at her. He saw the soot on her cheek, the blood on her shoulder, the wildness in her eyes. She did not look like an empress. She looked like a survivor. She looked like a partner. And for the first time she was looking at him with absolutely no barriers. No royal distance, no calculation. Just raw, terrifying gratitude. "You used the resonance," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "You turned the poison into the cure. How did you know the lattice would hold—" Jace looked at the ceiling, at the cooling conduits. "I did not," he admitted softly. "I just knew that if we were going to die, I wanted to go out loud." Naira laughed. It was a breathless, shaky sound. She leaned down, her forehead resting against his for a brief second. Her skin was hot, feverish, with the aftermath of the connection she had forged with the ship. "You are a madman, Jace Harlan," she whispered. "And you are the finest architect I have ever known." The word hung in the air. Architect. Jace stiffened slightly. He wanted to tell her. He wanted to confess right then and there that he was the architect because he was the creator. That the Harlan failsafe worked because it was named after him. But the moment was too fragile. The adrenaline was fading, leaving them both raw and trembling. Neera pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. Her gaze dropped to his lips, then back up. The air between them thickened, charged with something more volatile than plasma. It was the realization that they were two lonely creatures who had just faced death and refused to blink. "We are alive," she said, as if confirming it for herself. "Yeah," Jace breathed. "We are." She did not kiss him. It was too soon, too much chaos, too much blood. But she reached out and ran her thumb gently over the bruise forming on his cheekbone. Her claws were retracted, her touch impossibly soft. "Wait here," she said, her voice firming up the Empress, returning to the surface. "I need to secure the bridge. I need to accept Krail's surrender before he remembers how to breathe. But I will send the medics. Do not move." "I am not going anywhere," Jace said, closing his eyes. "I am comfortable right here on the floor." Neera stood up. She looked at him one last time, a look that promised this conversation was far from over, and then turned to stride out of the engineering deck. Her walk was unsteady, favoring her left leg, but her head was high. Jace lay on the cold metal deck. He listened to the hum of the engine, his engine. "You are welcome," he whispered to the ship. Then he let the darkness take him for a little while. By the time Jace woke up, he was in the infirmary of the Silver Howl. It was clean white and smelled of antiseptic and mint. He was lying on a biobed that was actively knitting the bruising on his ribs. He sat up, wincing. A medical droid, a floating sphere with spindly arms, buzzed over. "The patient must remain supine," the droid chirped. "Rib fractures are only 60% calcified." "I am fine," Jace grunted, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. He was wearing a clean tunic, Fenran-style gray and soft. His dirty coveralls were gone. The door slid open. It was not Neera. It was Captain Sarah, a female Fenran, with russet fur and a kind face. She was the one who had brought him water earlier in the repair. "You are awake," she said, smiling. "The Empress will be pleased. She has asked about your status 4 times in the last hour." "Where is she?" Jace asked, standing up and testing his balance. "On the bridge," Sarah said. "Dealing with the aftermath. The Warpack has surrendered. Thorn's proxies are in the brig. And your station took damage, but your AI says it is survivable. The Rust entity is currently arguing with our comms officer about docking protocols." Jace grinned. "Good old Rust. He hates guests." "The Empress requested you join her in the observation lounge when you are able," Sarah said. "She said there is a view you might like." Jace nodded. "Lead the way." The observation lounge was at the prow of the ship. It was a room of glass, offering a panoramic view of the nebula. Neera was standing by the window looking out. She had cleaned up. Her hair was braided again, though looser than before. She wore a fresh uniform, simple and elegant. She turned when he entered. "Jace," she said. There was relief in her voice. "Your Highness," Jace said, walking over to join her. Outside, the view was spectacular. The nebula was a swirl of purple and gold gas, and floating in the middle of it were the 3 disabled frigates, tethered by tractor beams to the Silver Howl. They looked like caught fish. And beyond them, Gallows Reach Station rotated slowly. It was scorched, one solar panel was hanging by a thread, and Sector 4 was venting its atmosphere. But it was there. It was standing. "We survived," Neera said quietly. "We did," Jace agreed. "Rauk is interrogating Krail," Neera said. "He has already admitted that the orders came directly from Thorn. This is the evidence I needed. When I return to the capital, I will not just have a fixed ship. I will have the leverage to purge the High Council." She turned to Jace. I owe that to you. You owe me a new sensor array for my station, Jace said. And maybe a new coffee machine. Naira smiled, but her eyes were serious. I owe you more than that. You saved my pack. You saved my life. She stepped closer. The distance between them was closing again. The way you modified the lattice, she said, her voice low. It was not just skill. It was ownership. You touched that code like you wrote it. Jace's heart skipped a beat. He looked out at the stars, debating whether to run or to jump. Maybe I just understand how things work, he said vaguely. Naira studied his profile. She did not push. Not yet. She knew there was a secret there, a heavy one. But she also knew that secrets, like shy animals, only came out when they felt safe. We will be leaving soon, she said. We have to escort the prisoners back. And I have a throne to reclaim. I figured, Jace said. The thought of the silver howl leaving left a hollow space in his chest that was bigger than the station. Come with us, Naira said. It was sudden. Jace looked at her. What? Come to the Dominion, she said. I can appoint you royal architect. You would have resources, respect a laboratory that isn't made of scrap metal. You would never have to eat those terrible protein bars again. It was a tempting offer. A life of comfort. A life of recognition. A life near her. But Jace looked at his hands. He looked at the reflection of his scorched station in the glass. I cannot, he said softly. Not yet. I have unfinished business here. And I do not do well in palaces. Too many rules. There are too many people who think I am just a grease monkey. Naira looked disappointed, her ears dipping slightly. But she nodded. She understood duty. She understood the need to stand on one's own ground. Then we will part ways, she said. For now. For now, Jace echoed. The silence returned, but it was not heavy. It was full of unsaid things. But, Jace added, looking at her, if you ever have another engine breakdown, you know where to find me. Naira smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, making them shine like the flux heart itself. I will keep that in mind, Jace Harlan, she said. I suspect my ship might develop a habit of breaking down in this sector. They stood together, a human mechanic and a wolf empress, watching the stars drift by. The battle was over. The war for the throne was just beginning. But in the quiet of the observation deck, none of that mattered. There was only the hum of the ship, the light of the nebula, and the certain knowledge that the universe had just gotten a little bit smaller for both of them. The arrival of the Royal Pack fleet was not subtle. They did not slip into the system like the Warpack frigates had hiding in the nebula's magnetic shadow. They arrived with the thunderous, spatial-tearing crack of a military-grade transition. One moment, the space around Gallows Reach was empty, save for the drifting carcasses of the enemy ships. The next, it was filled with Leviathans. 12 heavy cruisers, their hulls painted in the pristine silver and white of the Imperial Guard, formed a protective sphere around the wounded Silver Howl. They were sleek, deadly, and terrifyingly beautiful. Beside them, Jace's station looked like a discarded tin can floating in a palace fountain. Jace Harlan stood at the viewport of his command center, holding a mug of coffee that was actually hot for the first time in 3 years. That is a lot of firepower, Jace muttered. I hope they know parking isn't free. I have already transmitted the docking fee schedule, Rust, the station AI replied. The AI's voice was clearer now, lacking the static rasp that had defined it for a decade. The fleet commander responded with a level 4 encryption clearance and a digital packet containing enough credits to buy this station 300 times over. I believe they are ignoring the parking meter. Of course they are, Jace said, taking a sip. He looked at the formation. It was perfect, rigid, disciplined. It was the world Naira belonged to. For the last 48 hours, Gallows Reach had ceased to be a scrapyard and had become the temporary capital of the Fenrin Dominion. Shuttles zipped back and forth between the Silver Howl and the arriving fleet. Armored troops patrolled Jace's corridors, sniffing the air with suspicion. High-ranking wolf lords in ceremonial armor strode through his docking bays, looking at the rust with undisguised sneers, only to bow low when they entered the Empress's presence. Nira was no longer the mechanic in the grease-stained tactical suit. She was the Empress again. Jace had barely seen her. She was buried under a mountain of holographic briefings, strategic councils, and the grim business of securing her reign. The coup had failed, but the mess was vast. Lord Regent Calder Thorne had not been on the attack ships, he was too cunning for that, but the captains captured from the wreckage had sung. They provided encryption keys, bank transfer records, and communication logs that tied the sabotage directly to Thorne's private estate. It was enough to start a purge. It was enough to stop a civil war, or perhaps to start a necessary one. Incoming transmission from the Silver Howl, Rust announced. It is Captain Sarah. She requests permission to transfer a heavy cargo container to Docking Bay 3. Manifest lists it as diplomatic compensation. Granted, Jace said. He turned away from the window, looking at his command deck. It was already changing. The money from the Fenrin treasury had hit his accounts 12 hours ago. It was a string of zeros so long it looked like a glitch. Jace had immediately authorized Rust to purchase the premium upgrade package for the station's core systems. The lights no longer flickered. The air scrubbers were humming with a quiet, efficient breeze that smelled of pine and rain, a scent Jace had chosen because it reminded him of her. And the coolant leak in Sector 4. Jace walked over to the corner where the bucket used to sit. The pipe was new, a gleaming segment of hydro-wrapped alloy. The floor was dry. The rhythmic drip-hiss silence that had been the metronome of his loneliness for 5 years was gone. It was fixed. Everything was fixed. So why did the silence feel so much louder? Later that evening, the request came. Not a summons, but a request. The Empress wishes to inspect the Flux Heart one final time before departure. Jace met her at the airlock connecting the station to the flagship. The corridor was lined with royal guards, standing statue still, their polearms gleaming. When Nira appeared, she was wearing formal robes, deep indigo silk embroidered with silver thread that seemed to move like liquid starlight. A heavy mantle of white fur rested on her shoulders, and a thin, jagged circlet of platinum sat on her brow. She looked majestic. She looked powerful. She looked like a stranger. But then she saw him. She stopped waving a hand at her entourage. "Wait here," she commanded. Her voice was the voice of the throne, cool and absolute. "I will conduct the inspection alone. The architect has high-level clearance." The guards hesitated, eyeing Jace's tool belt, but they bowed and stepped back. Nira walked toward him. As soon as the blast doors hissed shut behind them, sealing them in the connecting tube, her shoulders slumped slightly. She let out a breath that ruffled the fur of her mantle. "I hate this collar," she said, tugging at the high neck of her robe. "It scratches." Jace smiled and the knot in his chest loosened just a fraction. "It looks expensive. Usually the more uncomfortable the clothes, the more important the person." "Then I must be the most important person in the galaxy," Nira muttered. She looked at him, her golden eyes searching his face. "You look tired, Jace. Did the credits not clear? I can have the treasurer executed if you like. Or at least fired." "The credits cleared," Jace said. "I bought a new coffee maker. And I fixed the leak. I am just adjusting to the quiet." They walked into the engineering deck of the Silver Howl. It was pristine. The debris from the battle had been cleared. The scorched panels had been replaced. In the center of the room, the Flux Heart pulsed with a steady, rhythmic beat. It was a soft, pure white humming a low baritone note that vibrated pleasantly in the teeth. It was singing. Jace walked up to the console. He did not need to check the readouts. He could feel the engine's health in the floorboards. "Stability is at 100%, Jace said. "Actually, 104%. The new lattice configuration is holding better than the simulations predicted. You will get an extra 3 light-years per jump cycle. Neera stood beside him, bathed in the white light of the core. She did not look at the engine. She looked at his hands resting on the controls. You rewrote the foundational logic of a Fenrir star drive in 10 minutes, she said softly. Under fire, while the ship was shaking apart. I had a good motivator, Jace said, keeping his eyes on the screen. I did not want to die. Jace, Neera said. The tone was different. It was the tone she had used when they were covered in grease, sharing a protein bar. I have had my best scholars looking at the code you wrote, the deeper layers. They say it is not Fenrir. They say the syntax matches a theoretical human dialect from the inner systems, a dialect that was banned by the Auric Reach Corporation. She paused. The hum of the engine filled the space between them. Where did you learn to speak to the machine like that? She asked. Who were you before you were the scrap king of Gallows Reach? Jace froze. He could lie. He could tell her it was scavenged data stolen from a dead smuggler. He could tell her he was just a savant with a knack for patterns. But he looked at her. He looked at the woman who had trusted him with her life, who had howled at the stars to save him. He could not give her the full truth that truth was a weapon that could hurt her political standing if it got out that she was harboring a blacklisted heretic. But he could not give her a lie. I was someone who believed in elegance, Jace said, choosing his words with the precision of a surgeon. I designed things, beautiful things, bridges between stars. But I was naive. I thought that if you built something perfect, people would use it to build, not to destroy. He turned to face her, leaning back against the console. I was wrong, he said. The people I worked for did not want bridges. They wanted leashes. They wanted weapons. When I refused to let them turn my work into a cage, they broke me. They erased my name. They threw me out here to rust. He gestured to the humming core. That heart beats the way I always dreamed an engine should beat. Smooth, strong, free. Neera stared at him. Her eyes widened slightly as the pieces clicked into place. She looked from him to the flux heart, the hybrid engine, the stolen design, the sabotage, that was actually a perversion of a masterwork. She knew. He could see it in the way her ears twitched, the way her breath hitched. She knew he was the creator. They stole it from you, she whispered. And we, my people, we bought it from thieves. Technology travels, Jace shrugged, trying to keep it light. It does not matter how it got here. What matters is that it is fixed. It is yours now, Neera. Not theirs. Yours. Make it mean something. Neera reached out. For a second he thought she was going to touch the console, but her hand bypassed the machine and landed on his forearm. Her grip was firm, warm through the silk of her sleeve. It means something because you fixed it, she said fiercely. You reclaimed it. She stepped closer. The scent of pine and ozone was overwhelming. Come with me, she said. The command was gone. It was a plea. My Fleet Admiral Highclaw Varric suggested we bring you to the capital. He wants to name you Honorary Advisor to the Crown. It is a title with no power usually given to retired poets. But I can make it real. I can give you a laboratory. I can give you protection. The Auric Reach cannot touch you in the Dominion. Jace looked at her hand on his arm. He imagined it. A life in the Wolf City. Clean clothes. Respect. Standing beside her at court. And he imagined the whispers. Politics. The assassins in the shadows who would see a human pet and sharpen their knives. He imagined the Auric Reach lawyers sending extradition requests, dragging his past into the light, forcing Neera to choose between her throne and her mechanic. He could not do that to her. And he could not go back to the world of contracts and lies. I cannot, Neera, Jace said. His voice was rough. Why, she did not let go. Because I am a mechanic, Jace said gently. I fix things that are broken. Your ship is fixed. Your reign is secure. You do not need a mechanic anymore, you need an Empress. I need a friend, Nira said. The vulnerability in her voice nearly broke him. You have one, Jace said. He is just remote, stationed in the frontier, keeping an eye on the back door. He covered her hand with his own. His skin was rough-scarred from years of welding. Hers was smooth, manicured, lethal. Gallows Reach is my home, Jace said. It is ugly and it smells like old socks, but it is mine. I ran away from the high towers once. I am not going back, not even for a palace made of silver. Nira looked at him for a long, agonizing minute. She was searching for a crack in his resolve, a hesitation she could exploit. But she found only the stubborn, quiet pride of a man who had finally stopped running. Slowly, her fingers uncurled from his arm. She stepped back. The mask of the Empress slid back into place, but her eyes remained soft. You are a stubborn creature, Jace Harlan, she said. I have been told, Jace replied. Usually by my AI. Very well, Nira said. She straightened her spine, the mantle settling around her. I will not order you. A wolf does not chain what it respects. She turned to the door. We depart in 1 hour. Commander Rauk has organized a formal farewell in the main hangar. He says it is protocol. I will be there, Jace said. Good, Nira said. She paused at the door, her back to him. And Jace, thank you, for the engine, and for the truth. Or at least the parts of it you allowed me to see. Then she was gone, leaving Jace alone with the singing heart of the ship he had designed in the silence he had chosen. The main hangar of Gallows Reach was the largest pressurized space on the station, usually reserved for bulk freighters and mining haulers. Today, it looked like a parade ground. 200 Fenran Royal Guards stood in formation. They were arranged in 2 perfect lines, forming a corridor of black armor and silver fur that led from the airlock of the Silver Howl to the station's exit. Jace stood at the end of that corridor, near the station blast doors. He felt ridiculous. He had tried to clean up, he had shaved, combed his hair, and put on the newest jumpsuit he owned, a dark blue one that still had the creases from the package. But standing before the elite soldiers of the Dominion, he felt like a smudge on a pristine painting. He held his tool belt in his left hand, gripping the leather strap like a lifeline. It was his badge of office. It was the only thing that proved he belonged here. The trumpets sounded a digital fanfare broadcast from the ship's speakers. The guards snapped to attention, their boots hitting the deck in a single, thunderous crash. Clang. Nira emerged from the ship. She walked slowly down the corridor of soldiers. She was fully regaled now. The circlet on her head seemed to catch every photon of light in the hangar. Her cape flowed behind her, like a liquid shadow. Rauk walked 2 steps behind her to the left. Captain Sarah walked 2 steps behind to the right. She looked terrifying. She looked unapproachable. Jace straightened his back. Do not bow, he told himself. She does not want you to bow. Nira reached the end of the line. She stopped 3 meters from Jace. The silence in the hangar was absolute. Even the ventilation fans seemed to hold their breath. Rauk stepped forward, holding a data pad. On behalf of the High Council and the Royal Pack, we formally acknowledge the assistance of Gallows Reach Station. The debt is paid. The account is settled. It was a cold, transactional farewell. Rauk looked at Jace with a mixture of grudging respect and lingering distaste. Thank you, Commander, Jace said. Safe travels. Nira raised her hand. Commander, Captain, clear the deck. Rauk blinked. Your Highness, the launch window is in 11 minutes. We must... I said clear the deck, Nira said. Her voice did not rise, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Leave us. Take the guards. Wait in the airlock. Rauk looked at Jace, then at the Empress. He clenched his jaw, saluted sharply, and barked an order. Company fallout, return to ship. The discipline was absolute. In 60 seconds, the hangar was empty. The rhythmic thud of 200 pairs of boots faded, followed by the hiss of the inner airlock ceiling. Jace and Nira stood alone in the cavernous, grease-stained bay. Nira let out a sigh, her posture relaxing instantly. She reached up and unhooked the heavy fur mantle, letting it slide from her shoulders to the floor. She did not care that it landed in a puddle of hydraulic fluid. "I hate goodbyes," she said. "They are inefficient." "They are necessary," Jace said. He stepped forward. The distance between them was now only an arm's length. "You have a galaxy to rule, Nira. You cannot stay in a scrapyard forever." "I could," she said, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "I could abdicate. Open a noodle stand on the promenade. I make excellent noodles," Jace laughed. It was a genuine, aching laugh. "I bet you do. But you would get bored. You would start organizing the noodles by structural integrity. And then, you would conquer the neighboring noodle stands." Nira smiled, but it faded quickly. She looked at him, her expression turning somber. "You saved me, Jace," she said softly. "Not just my life. You saved my belief that there is something out here worth fighting for. The Council War makes you hard. It makes you think everyone is a knife waiting to cut you." She took a step closer. "You treated me like a person," she whispered. "Not a prize, not a target, not a god. Just Nira." "Nira is pretty impressive on her own," Jace said. "She does not need the crown." He stuck out his hand. It was a human gesture, formal, safe, a handshake between partners. "It was an honor, Your Highness," Jace said. Nira looked at his hand. She looked at the calluses, the scars, the grease that never quite washed out of the knuckles. Then she looked up at his eyes. "No," she said. She ignored his hand. She stepped into his space, closing the gap completely. Before Jace could react, before his brain could process the breach of protocol, she reached up. Her hands, strong, warm, claw-tipped, cupped his face. She pulled him down. It was not a tentative kiss. It was not a polite peck on the cheek. It was a collision. Her lips pressed against his firm and demanding. It tasted of the mint tea she drank and the electric charge of the ozone that always clung to her. It was a kiss of adrenaline and relief and a desperate, illogical longing. Jace froze for a heartbeat, his mind reeling. Then instinct took over. He dropped his tool belt. It clattered to the deck with a heavy metallic crash. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer, burying his hands in the expensive silk of her robes. He felt her body react. He felt the soft fur of her ears tremble against his forehead. He felt her tail arrest its motion, going rigid with tension. It lasted only a few seconds, but in those seconds, the universe narrowed down to a single point of contact. No station, no fleet, no empire. Just the heat of her. Nira pulled back but only an inch. Her forehead rested against his. Her eyes were closed, her breathing ragged. "Wait for me," she whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Jace stared at her, his pulse hammering in his throat. He wanted to laugh. It was absurd. She was the Wolf Empress. He was a disgraced mechanic. There was no future where this worked. There was no timeline where the galaxy let them happen. But looking at her face, stripped of all royalty, raw and open, he knew. He knew he wasn't going anywhere. "I am not going anywhere," Jace whispered back. "I will be right here." Nira opened her eyes. The gold was liquid, shining with unshed tears. She brushed her thumb over his lip, tracing the shape of it. Then the mask slammed back down. She stepped back. She took a deep breath, her spine straightening, her chin lifting. She did not pick up her mantle. She did not look back at the puddle of fluid. "Rust," she said aloud, addressing the station AI. "Clearance code Alpha 9. Initiate separation sequence." "Acknowledged, Your Highness," Rust's voice boomed from the ceiling. Nira turned. She did not look at Jace again. If she looked, she would stay. And she could not stay. She strode toward the airlock, her boots clicking rhythmically on the deck. The blast doors opened for her, revealing the waiting ranks of her guards. She walked through them without breaking stride, a figure of solitary power, marching back into the cold light of responsibility. The doors hissed shut. Jace stood alone in the hangar. His tool belt lay at his feet. His lips still burned. Jace sat in the command chair of Gallows Reach. The station was shaking, vibrating with the proximity of the fleet's mass drivers, powering up for the jump. "The fleet is at optimal coordinates," Rust reported. "FTL drives are spinning up. Jump in 10 seconds. Jace watched the main screen. The Silver Howl was in the center of the formation, a diamond surrounded by daggers. Its engines, the engines he had healed, the engines that beat with his rhythm, were glowing a fierce, brilliant blue. 5, Rust counted. 4, 3. Jace put his hand on the cold glass of the screen, right over the image of the flagship. 2, 1. The universe stretched. There was a flash of light that was not light, a color that the human eye couldn't quite process, the color of distance being folded in half. And then they were gone. The space where the fleet had been was empty. Just the cold, indifferent stars and the swirling dust of the nebula. Silence rushed back into Gallows Reach. It was not the silence of the coolant leak. It was not the silence of neglect. It was a heavy, pregnant silence. A silence that was waiting for something. Jace leaned back in his chair. He reached up and touched his lips. He looked at the empty space on the screen. He knew the odds. He knew politics. He knew it might be years. He knew she might never come back. But then he remembered the Flux heart singing. He remembered the way she had looked at him in the smoke. He remembered the whisper. "Wait for me," Jace Harlan smiled. It was a small, sad, hopeful smile. "Rust," he said. "Yes, Jace. Keep the coffee maker hot and keep a channel open on the encrypted frequency she gave us." "For how long?" Rust asked. "Energy consumption for a continuous encrypted scan is significant." Jace closed his eyes, listening to the hum of his station, his home, his castle, his waiting room. "Forever," Jace said. "Keep it open forever." He picked up his hydrospanner and spun it idly in his fingers. The coolant leak was fixed. The station was rich. The Wolf Empress was gone. But for the first time in a decade, Jace Harlan wasn't just surviving. He was waiting. And that made all the difference in the universe. Time had a way of moving differently when you were rich. Before the Silver Howl incident, time at Gallows Reach had been measured in the rhythmic dripping of coolant leaks and the slow, grinding decay of rusted metal. It had been a linear progression of entropy. Things broke, Jace fixed them, they broke again. Now, 3 months later, time felt like a blur of efficiency. The compensation transfer from the Fenran Dominion Treasury had been staggering. It was a sum of credits so large that when Jace first looked at his account balance, he assumed it was a display error. It was enough to buy a small moon, or perhaps a very large, very corrupt politician. Jace had done neither. Instead, he had bought silence. He had replaced the entire atmospheric cycling system. The air in the station no longer smelled of stale sweat and ozone. It smelled of crisp, scrubbed oxygen, with a faint, artificial hint of pine forest, a scent he had chosen because it reminded him of the way Naira's cloak had smelled. He had upgraded Rust. The station's AI had been transferred from the patchwork server bank in the basement to a top-of-the-line quantum processing core. Rust's voice was now smooth, rich, and irritatingly polite. "Good morning, Jace," Rust said, his voice echoing through the gleaming command center. "The structural integrity sensors in Sector 4 are reading 100%. The new hydroponic gardens in the habitation ring are flourishing. And there are 3 freighters requesting docking permission. 2 are carrying iridium ore. 1 is a luxury transport seeking repairs for a localized shield generator failure." Jace stood by the viewport, sipping coffee from a cup that was made of actual ceramic, not dented tin. He wore a clean jumpsuit. His hands were scrubbed pink, the permanent grease stains finally fading under the assault of high-grade sonic cleaners. "Let the freighters in," Jace said, staring out at the starfield. Charge the luxury transport triple. If they can afford a shield generator that fancy, they can afford the stupidity tax for breaking it. Very good, Rust replied. Efficiency is up by 14% this week. You are becoming quite the tycoon. I am not a tycoon, Jace muttered. I am just a janitor with a better mop. He turned away from the window. The command center was unrecognizable. The duct tape was gone. The flickering screens were replaced by holographic projectors. The floor was polished to a mirror shine. It was perfect. It was efficient. It was everything he had told himself he wanted for 10 years. And he had never been more lonely in his life. The loneliness was different now. Before, it had been the loneliness of abandonment, the feeling that the universe had forgotten Jace Harlan existed. Now it was the loneliness of a crowded room. The news of the miracle at Gallows Reach had spread. Smugglers whispered about the human mechanic who had resurrected a Wolf flagship. The station was busy. Pilots bought him drinks at the newly renovated bar. Traders tried to shake his hand. But none of them knew the Flux Heart. None of them looked at a line of code and saw a symphony. And none of them had golden eyes that looked through his skin and saw the architect hiding beneath the grease. Jace walked to the console. He pulled a protein bar from his pocket, an old habit hard to break, even though he could afford real steak now. He unwrapped it, broke it in half, and instinctively placed the second half on the console ledge to his right. He paused, his hand hovering over the empty space. There was no one there to eat it. There was no Empress in a tactical suit complaining about the texture while saving his life. Jace stared at the piece of food for a long second, his throat tight. Then he picked it up and threw it into the waste recycler. Status on the Dominion news feeds, Jace asked, his voice rough. The civil unrest in the Fenrin capital has stabilized, Rust reported, projecting a news hologram into the air. The investigation into Lord Regent Calder Thorne is concluding. He has been stripped of his titles and exiled to the frozen wastes of the Outer Rim. The High Council has been restructured. Jace watched the images flicker by. Triumphant parades. Wolf lords bowing. And the Empress, Jace asked. Empress Nyra Fenra appeared before the Senate yesterday, Rust said. The image shifted. There she was. She stood on a high balcony of silver stone, addressing a crowd of thousands. She wore the full regalia of the Moonpack, the heavy robes, the crown, the mantle of authority. She looked distant, terrifying and composed. She spoke of unity, of strength, of a new era for the Dominion. She did not look like the woman who had kissed him in a grease-stained hangar. She looked like a statue carved from ice and starlight. She looks busy, Jace said softly. She is ruling an empire of 12 systems, Rust noted. It is likely a time-consuming occupation, Jace nodded. He turned off the hologram. Right, he said, picking up his hydrospanner, though there was nothing to fix. Back to work. Those shields will not repair themselves. 2 weeks later, the Silent Hunter arrived. It was not a flagship. It was a corvette, small and swift, painted in the matte black of the Royal Intelligence Service. It slipped out of hyperspace with a whisper, not a bang, and glided toward the station like a shadow detaching itself from the darkness. Unidentified Fenran vessel requesting docking, Rust announced. They are broadcasting high-level diplomatic clearance codes. Jace felt a jolt in his chest, a sudden spike of adrenaline that made his hands shake. He forced himself to take a breath. Do not hope, he told himself. It is just business. Probably a courier with more legal paperwork. Guide them to Bay 3, Jace said. I will meet them. He walked to the bay, smoothing the front of his jumpsuit. He checked his reflection in a polished panel. He looked respectable. He hated it. The airlock cycled. The steam cleared. It was not Nyra. Jace felt the disappointment hit him, like a physical blow, heavy and dull. He kept his face neutral, locking his expression into the mask of the professional station master. Captain Sarah stepped through the mist. The russet-furred wolf woman looked exactly as she had on the flagship, calm, professional, with kind eyes that seemed to notice everything. She was flanked by 2 guards, carrying a heavy, ornate crate. "Master Harlan," Sarah said, tilting her head. "It is good to see you. You look cleaner." "Captain Sarah," Jace said, managing a dry smile. "I will try. It is amazing what a little soap and infinite money can do. How is the fleet?" "The fleet is strong," Sarah said. "The Silver Howl is running at 112% efficiency. The engineers are terrified to touch it for fear of ruining your calibration." "Tell them not to touch the red wire," Jace said automatically. "It is not a wire. It is a load-bearing structural illusion," Sarah chuckled. She signaled the guards to set the crate down, then dismissed them. They retreated to the ship, leaving Jace and Sarah alone in the bay. Sarah looked at him. Her amusement faded, replaced by a gentle seriousness. "I am not here for repairs, Jace," she said. "I figured," Jace said, looking at the crate. It was made of dark ironwood, inlaid with silver geometric patterns. "Is that more money? Because honestly, I am running out of things to upgrade. I was thinking of gold plating the toilets next." "It is not money," Sarah said. She reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a smaller box. It was black velvet, small enough to fit in her palm. "The Empress wished to deliver this herself, but the political climate in the capital is delicate. For her to leave now to come to the frontier would raise questions she is not yet ready to answer." Jace nodded. "I understand. Politics before plumbing." Sarah stepped forward and held out the small box. "She told me to give you this," Sarah said. "And she told me specifically that you would try to look very calm, but your hands would be trembling slightly." Jace looked at his hands. They were indeed vibrating with a fine tremor. He clenched them into fists. "She knows me too well," Jace murmured. "She knows you better than you think," Sarah corrected. "Open it." Jace took the box. He opened the lid. Inside, resting on a cushion of blue silk, lay a pendant. It was made of pure silver, shaped like a wolf's claw, but it was not organic. The surface was etched with microscopic circuitry, glowing faint blue lines that pulsed with a heartbeat rhythm. It was a piece of technology, brutal and elegant. "A quantum entanglement communicator," Jace whispered, recognizing the tech immediately. "Paired twin cores, 0 latency, infinite range." "It is linked to a matching unit she wears," Sarah explained. "It bypasses the Dominion relay network. No one can listen. No one can trace it. It is a direct line to the throne room." Jace ran his thumb over the cool metal. It hummed against his skin. "And the crate?" Jace asked, nodding at the large box on the floor. "A holographic projector," Sarah said. She recorded a message. "It is encrypted to your biosignature. Only you can open it." Sarah stepped back. "I have orders to patrol the sector for 2 days before returning. That gives you time to process." She turned to leave, then paused. "Jace," she said softly. "She talks about the station often. She calls it the only quiet place in the universe." Sarah smiled, then walked back up the ramp of her ship. Jace sat in his quarters. The lights were dimmed. The large ironwood crate sat in the center of the room. He had activated the seal, and the top had unfolded, like a lotus flower, revealing a complex array of projector lenses. He held the silver claw in his hand. "Rust," Jace said. "Secure the room. Privacy mode. Cut the external sensors." "Privacy mode active," the AI confirmed. "We are sealed." Jace stepped into the projection field. "Play." The air shimmered. Light coalesced, weaving itself into form and color. Nira stood in the center of his room. It was a recording, but the fidelity was so high, it felt like she was breathing the same air. She was not wearing her state robes. She was wearing the tactical bodysuit from the engine room, clean but worn. Her hair was loose. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright, burning with that same golden intensity that had haunted his dreams for 3 months. "Hello, Jace," the hologram said. Her voice was soft, stripped of the imperial echo. "If you are seeing this, then Sarah found you. And knowing you, you are probably pretending that you are not happy to see her." Jace smiled involuntarily. "Guilty." The holographic Naira paced a small circle, her tail flicking behind her. She looked nervous. "I have spent the last 3 months cleaning up the mess Thorn left behind," she began. "The trials were long. The evidence you helped us recover from the Silver Howl's black box was damning. Thorn is gone. The Warpack is dismantled." She stopped pacing and looked directly at the camera, looking right into Jace's eyes. "But there is something I did not tell you," she said. "Something about how we met." Jace frowned. He leaned forward. "I told you it was an accident," Naira said. "I told you that the sabotage forced us to drop out of hyperspace at the nearest station, which happened to be yours. I told you it was fate." She took a breath. "I lied." The silence in the room was absolute. "The sabotage was real," Naira continued. "The danger was real. But the location was a choice." She raised her hand, and a secondary hologram appeared next to her, a schematic of a flux lattice. His flux lattice, the one he had drawn on a napkin years ago. "When I decided to upgrade the Silver Howl," Naira said, "I realized the standard Fenren designs were hitting a ceiling. I needed something radical. My spies in the Auric Reach archives found a rejected file. A heretical design by a disgraced human engineer named Jace Harlan." Jace felt the blood drain from his face. She had known. She had known from the very beginning. "I read your file, Jace," Naira said. "I read the transcripts of your trial. I read the Council's dismissal. They called you unstable. They called you dangerous." She smiled, a fierce, sharp expression. "I looked at your math and I saw a genius who was too big for his cage. I saw a mind that thought like a wolf, instinctive, predatory, brilliant." The hologram walked closer to him. "I ordered the retrofit using your stolen plans," she admitted. "But I knew I needed an architect. I knew that eventually the system would need its father. So I had my intelligence officers track you. We found you at Gallows Reach 3 years ago." She paused. "When the sabotage hit, when the efficiency virus started to cook the core, I had a choice. I could have limped to a Dominion naval yard. It would have been safe. But I ordered the navigator to plot a course for the frontier." "I came to you, Jace," she whispered. "I brought the ship to your doorstep because I knew you were the only one who could fix it. But more than that, I wanted to see if the man matched the mind." Jace sat back in his chair, stunned. He had spent 10 years believing he was trash. He had believed he was a forgotten component, discarded by the great machine of the galaxy. But he hadn't been forgotten. He had been watched. He had been studying. And in the moment of her greatest crisis, the Empress of the Dominion had bet her life, her ship, and her empire on him. He wasn't a victim of bad luck. He was the destination. "You were never invisible, Jace," the hologram said, answering his unvoiced thought. "Not to me." Naira clasped her hands behind her back. "This brings me to my offer. You refuse to come to the capital. You refuse to be a courtier. Good. I expected nothing less. A wolf does not do well on a leash, and neither do you. But the Dominion needs you. The frontier needs you." She gestured, and a map of the border systems appeared, a web of trade routes connecting Fenrin space and the human frontier. "I am creating a new position," she said. "The Free Architect of the Border. It is an independent title. You answer to no council. You answer to no corporation. You answer only to me. Your station will remain yours, but I will funnel resources to you. I want you to build the bridges you spoke of, design the jump gates, upgrade the trade stations, create a network that binds our peoples together through technology, not war." She stepped closer again, her image shimmering slightly. "You can keep your scrap heap," she said, her voice softening. "But let us weave some silver into it. Let us build something that makes the Auric Reach regret the day they let you go." The hologram of the map faded. Naira stood alone again, She reached up and touched the silver claw at her own throat, the twin of the one Jace held. "I told you to wait for me," she said. "I meant it. I cannot leave the throne yet. There are too many knives still hidden in the shadows. But I will come back. Not because my ship is broken, but because we have work to do." She leaned in, her golden eyes burning with promise. "And perhaps," she whispered, a flush rising on her cheeks, "because I miss the way you look at me when you think I am not noticing. I miss the silence of your station. I miss you." She straightened up, regaining her composure. "Put on the claw, architect. If you accept, call me. If you do not, keep it anyway. Consider it payment for the coffee." The hologram flickered and died. Jace sat in the dark. The silence of the room felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was pregnant with potential. He looked at the silver claw in his hand. He thought about the betrayal of the Auric Reach, how they had stolen his life. And then, he thought about Nira, how she had stolen his design, yes, but then had come back to give him the credit, the power, and the truth. She had turned his exile into a strategy. She had turned his Bayrak into a fortress. Jace stood up. He walked to the viewport. Out there in the dark, the stars were cold and distant. But somewhere, light years away, there was a woman with golden eyes who was wearing the matching half of this device. He unclasped the silver chain. He placed it around his neck. The cool metal settled against his collarbone. He felt a faint hum, a quantum resonance. It was a connection, an invisible thread stretching across the void. Jace tapped the claw. "Rust," he said. "Open a quantum channel. Encryption key, architect." "Channel open," Rust replied instantly. "Signal strength is infinite. Connecting." A faint chime sounded. "Jace," her voice was real. It wasn't a recording. It was tinny, coming from the small speaker in the pendant, but it was her. He could hear the rustle of silk in the background, the distant murmur of a court. "Hello, Your Highness," Jace said, his voice thick with emotion. "You called," she said. He could hear the smile in her voice. "Does this mean you accept?" "I am keeping the station," Jace said, grinning at his reflection in the glass. "And I am going to need a bigger budget. If we are building bridges, I want them to be indestructible." "Granted," Nira said immediately. "Anything else?" "Yeah," Jace said. "Next time you visit, bring better snacks. The protein bars are still terrible." Nira laughed. It was a sound of pure joy echoing across the light years. "I will bring a banquet. Wait for me, Jace." "I am right here," Jace said. "I am not going anywhere." He tapped the claw again, closing the connection, but leaving the line open, a silent hum of presence against his skin. Jace looked around his command center. It was clean. It was high-tech. It was ready. Drip. Jace froze. He tilted his head. Hiss. He sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of suffering. He walked over to the far wall near the newly installed atmospheric scrubbers. A small bead of condensation had formed on a pipe joint. It swelled heavy and glistening and then fell. Drop. A new leak. Jace stared at it. 3 months ago, this would have been a sign of failure. It would have been a reminder of his poverty, his inability to keep entropy at bay. Now, Jace looked at the puddle forming on his expensive polished floor. He threw his head back and laughed. "Okay," he said to the empty room. "Okay." He walked over to his tool chest, the old, battered red one that he hadn't thrown away. He picked up his favorite hydrospanner and a roll of sealing tape. "Rust," Jace said, walking toward the leak with a spring in his step. "Order some more coffee, and pull up the schematics for a transsector jump gate. I have some ideas." "Right away, architect," Rust replied. Jace knelt down by the pipe. The water dripped onto his knee. He didn't mind. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was the architect of the border. He was the man who held the Wolf Empress's heart in a quantum locket. And he had work to do. The universe was vast, dangerous, and full of leaks. But as Jace Harlan twisted the wrench, Feeling the satisfying bite of metal on metal, he knew one thing for certain. He was finally exactly where he was supposed to be.